Saint of the Day. November 4th. Saint Charles Borromeo, Cardinal and Archbishop of Milan. Born, October 2, 1538, Castle of Arona, Duchy of Milan. Died, November 3, 1584, aged 46, Milan. Venerated in Roman Catholic Church. Beatified, May 12, 1602, Pope Clement VIII. Canonized, November 1, 1610, Pope Paul V. Important shrines: Milan Cathedral. Feast, November 4th. Patronage: against ulcers, apple orchards, bishops, catechists, catechumens, colic, intestinal disorders, Lombardy, Italy, Monterey, California, cardinals, seminarians, spiritual directors, spiritual leaders, starch makers, stomach diseases, São Carlos City in Brazil, as the name indicates. Saint Charles Borromeo was Roman Catholic Archbishop of Milan from 1564 to 1584 and a cardinal. He was a leading figure of the Counter-Reformation combat against the Protestant Reformation together with Saint Ignatius of Loyola and Saint Philip Neri. In that role, he was responsible for significant reforms in the Catholic Church, including the founding of seminaries for the education of priests. He is honored as a saint by the Roman Catholic Church, with a feast day on November 4th. Comments: something that can be noticed in history is that when people reach an apogee, great men start to appear. And many of these great men are so closely bound to the post that they occupy that the person almost seems to disappear and only the position shines. Let us consider some examples. There is one man who until today is the Emperor of Emperors, the perfect and definitive pattern for all emperors. This is so true that when one thinks about an emperor, one thinks foremost of him. It is Charlemagne. After Charlemagne died, the invasions that he had stopped began again. The empire that he had built broke up, the Europe that he wanted to unite fragmented into many kingdoms and smaller political units, the dynasty he founded was extinguished. Everything would lead to the conclusion that his memory would disappear. But Charlemagne remained forever in the memory of all men as the prototype of the Catholic emperor, and, therefore, the emperor par excellence. The memory of Charlemagne endured with all the imperial dignity, plenitude of personality, and elevation of spirit proper to an emperor sent by God to do his work on earth. Louis XIV is the French king par excellence, the Sun King. Philip II of Spain was par excellence the king who defended the faith. In the same way, you can find other personages who personified all the facets of the roles they exercised. The same rule applies inside the Holy Church of God. Saint Gregory VII was the Pope par excellence, Saint John Baptist Vianney was the model for all parish priests, and Saint Charles Borromeo was the prototype of a bishop. As a true pastor who watches over his flock, he was alert to the way error was being presented at his time and took a strong position against it. Like many other preeminent figures of the Counter-Reformation, he helped Catholic doctrine progress by developing the doctrine that Protestantism denied. In his written works, he deduced new developments from truths already known. His position was always militant, as a bishop should be. He was not an ecumenical prelate who accepts little parts of the truth that the error might have in order to appease the heretic. He would analyze the ensemble of the heresy he was dealing with and discern its ultimate bad intentions. Then he would refute the error in these malicious points and develop the opposite doctrine of the Church. Saint Charles Borromeo was not only a great bishop of the Counter-Reformation but in a certain sense, he was the bishop of the Counter-Reformation. This title is his not just because he was a very learned man, but rather because he became the very archetype of a bishop. He was not satisfied with writing books against the errors of the time, which he did. But he did, even more, he personified the truths he defended in his books. He became the very symbol of what he wrote. I could describe various facets of Saint Borromeo that made him a model bishop if I had more time. But this would make me late for the meeting that follows this one. So let me summarize his life in an example I find very significant. A cardinal, as you know, is supposed to dress with pomp, grandeur, and solemnity to glorify our Lord Jesus Christ before men. In addition to being a prince of the Church, Saint Charles Borromeo was a temporal lord in Milan, born into a great and noble Italian family. In his 20s, he was entrusted with the responsible post of Papal Secretary of State. Therefore, he used to dress and appear in great style. Once his carriage was on its way to one of his appointments when a simple friar, who was walking on the road, approached it. Saint Charles Borromeo ordered the driver to stop the vehicle. The friar greeted him and said, "Your Eminence, how nice it must be to live the life of a cardinal, to wear such splendid clothes and travel in a magnificent carriage. Surely it is much more agreeable than to be a simple friar like me, and walk by foot." Cardinal Borromeo kindly invited the friar to accompany him. The friar seated himself next to the cardinal and the journey recommenced. Shortly the friar began to cry out in pain because the beautiful cushions of the benches were placed over a board of sharp iron nails of penance that the cardinal normally used to mortify himself. The pain became more acute with every movement of the vehicle. The friar could not support such mortification and begged that the carriage stop for him to get out. Relieved, he returned to his walk by foot. That is to say, the silks and crystals of the luxurious carriage were meant to be seen by the people to glorify God and the dignity of his post. Underneath the splendid appearance of a cardinal, the saint continued to practice penance for his sins and those of his flock. We can ask Saint Charles Borromeo to intercede with our Lord and Our Lady for several things on his feast day. For the reform of today's bishops who so often are very different from the model he represented. For the restoration of the seminaries, so immersed in bad morals and false doctrine. And finally, for the restoration of the entire Holy Catholic Church today as he helped to restore her in his times. For ourselves personally, we might ask him to give us his vigilance against heresy and his heroic sense of sacrifice.